Let's move it up to the 20th century. Okay, it's the last century now. Howard Hanson. Anyone heard of Howard Hanson? Okay, well, back when I was in high school, Howard Hanson was the greatest thing in music education since sliced bread. He was the director of the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York for about 40 years. Wrote, all kinds of music, symphonies, chamber music, etc., and was a champion of music education. He's sort of the patron saint of the 20th century, for music education in America. And back in the early 1940s, of all things, the American Psychiatric Association invited him to give a speech at their annual meeting on 2 separate occasions. And these speeches were published then as articles in the Journal of the American Psychiatric Association in 1942 and 1944. They asked him, one of his speeches was on a musician's point of view towards emotional expression. And here's what he said. Music is a curiously subtle art with innumerable varying emotional connotations. It is made up of many ingredients, and according to the proportion of these components, it can be soothing or invigorating, ennobling or vulgarizing, philosophical or orgiastic. It has powers for evil as well as for good. Another big guy in music last century, he's kind of not really a household word anymore, but we'll try it out anyway. Archibald T. Davison. Okay, this guy was, had a really long career. He was the choral director, directed the choirs at Harvard University for almost 50 years, starting in 1913. He wrote a bunch of books about music. He edited stuff, and so forth. In 1952, he wrote a book on church music. And that was called Church Music, Illusion and Reality, published by who else but Harvard University Press. And in this book, he observed the following, that I think is kind of worthy of our consideration. He said that verbal communication, either spoken or written, communicates or enters our person, the audience, the reader, the hearer, first via the intellect. From there, it sort of grows out or flows out into the imagination, and from the imagination over into the emotions. Music, on the other hand, flows the opposite way. It first penetrates our emotional selves, and then flows on over to the imagination, and finally to the intellect. An interesting suggestion. So, according to what Davison says, you imagine that if you have a song with both music and words, that you're sort of inputting on 2 levels, the emotional side as well as the intellectual side. So it's potentially seems like a pretty powerful medium for communication. Well, the Bible, the Bible said it first, okay? Sing unto the Lord with the harp and the voice of a psalm, with trumpets and sound of cornet, make a joyful noise before the Lord the King. Instrumental sound has emotional content. Think of that. The mirth of tabrets ceaseth. The noise of them that rejoice endeth. The joy of the harp ceaseth. The mirth of tabrets, the joy of the harp. All right? A similar thought. Well, in addition to music possessing emotional qualities, the Bible indicates that music can induce an emotional response. They take the timbrel and harp and rejoice at the sound of the organ. For example, here's an interesting one that closely identifies, well, I'll read it to you. They that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. They wanted mirth. What did they mean by that? Sing us a song. Well, probably in modern civilization, a musician who dealt with this topic quite a bit, a very wonderful guy, Felix Mendelssohn. You may have heard of him, a major composer of the 1800s. He wrote this in a letter to one of his friends. People usually complain that music is so ambiguous, that it is so doubtful what they ought to think when they hear it, whereas everyone understands words. With me, it is entirely the converse, and not only with regard to an entire speech, but also with individual words. These, too, seem to me to be so ambiguous, so vague, and so easily misunderstood in comparison with genuine music, which fills the soul with 1,000 things better than words. The thoughts which are expressed to me by a piece of music which I love are not too indefinite to be put into words, but on the contrary, too definite. And so I find, in every attempt to express such thoughts, that something is right, but at the same time something is unsatisfying in all of them. And he goes on to mention, as examples, resignation, melancholy, the praise of God in music as examples. You know, Mendelssohn wrote a whole series of pieces for the piano called Songs Without Words. In fact, I think he kind of trademarked that particular label, Songs Without Words. It was the first composer to use that to title a collection of works that he had done. And here are some titles. There are no words to these songs. Here are some of the titles. There are several dozen songs. Some of the titles: Sweet Remembrance, Confidence, Restlessness, Faith, Consolation, Regret, Contemplation, Lost Happiness, Hope, and there are others. Well, I'm going to refine our definition of music now. Music is a planned sequence of sounds, including nonverbal sounds of definite pitch, created to express or communicate thoughts, moods, attitudes, states of mind or body, or the emotions of the author, and or to affect these same aspects of the listener. A term that I've coined, as far as I know, that I believe captures much of the essence of how music affects us is the word attitude. Combination of attitude and mood. Okay? Attitude being a predisposition to respond to circumstances in a particular way. You know, if a guy has a smart-alecky attitude or something, that means you wouldn't really call smart-aleckiness an emotion, right? I mean, you don't think of it as an emotion. But when circumstances come up, he's kind of predisposed to respond in what we call a smart-alecky way. Mood, you know, now this smart-alecky guy could be depressed one day, or he could be sort of high on another day, but smart-alecky in either circumstance, right? So, attitude, okay, a combination of attitude and mood. Mood is more on the emotional side, while attitude is more on the action side. Music affects both areas. It affects our attitude. Well, now we played Jesus Loves Me, a couple of different flavors. Have we exhausted the musical possibilities in that song? Well, let's try something a little different. All right, well, a little different. Okay. Well, you know, it's sort of like the guy said, it was a real good piano player one time, and somebody said to him, you know, you play the piano so well, the only time people hear you is when you make a mistake. Now, I don't want to be that way. Okay. So. Anyway, I want you to hear when I hit a right note occasionally. Okay. Well, what is the situation with this song? There are a whole lot of notes there. I call this exhilaration without exhibition. I'm hoping that maybe in there you sensed a little bit of excitement, okay? There was some intensity there. There was something moving. On the other hand, we probably didn't feel like starting to kind of move around in our chairs or tap our feet necessarily or clap, okay? It just, you know, I don't think we felt like doing that. The tempo was faster. We were back in the major mode. The notes were coming a lot faster. We might have sensed some excitement, maybe even joy, but no jive, okay? Well, what's going on here? To clarify that, we need to introduce some terminology. Beat, tempo, meter, and rhythm. Beat, sequence of pulses at a regular interval. Tempo, how quick one beat follows the next. Tempo, oftentimes expressed in beats per minute. Meter, the organization of beats into larger units of several beats. And each little segment of beats is distinguished by the first beat being a little stronger. Bum, 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 bum. Or maybe bum, 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 bum. Or maybe bum, 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 bum. All right. Rhythm. Well, how about rhythm? The rhythm is the subdivision of the meter by means of sounds of various lengths and strengths. All right. So behind the rhythm, we'll call it, you know, meter itself is a rhythm, okay? But for the purposes of precision here, we're going to say the meter is just sitting there going. It's a regular beat with a pulse every so many beats, a stronger pulse. But then there's rhythm on top of that. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. That's pretty regular rhythm. We'll have some further exploration of rhythm a little later. But those terms, beat, tempo, meter, and rhythm, now give us kind of a conceptual framework we can move ahead with. Here's what Hansen said, Howard Hansen, back in 1944, his second speech to the psychiatrists.